fiscal year 2016 New York City water rates. My name is Eric Landau, and I will serve as the hearing officer for tonight's meeting. I'd like to take just a minute to give a brief overview of the evening's process. First, we would like to thank Hostos Community College for hosting us this evening for our Bronx public hearing. Second, we'd like you all to note that we place certain documents into the official record. The notice designating me as the hearing officer, a copy of the public notice listing this hearing, and an affidavit of publication of such notice, the draft of the proposed water and wastewater rate schedule, the public information booklet regarding water and wastewater rates, a copy of which is available at the table up front, and also written statements that have been submitted to the water. These items are all marked exhibits 1 through 5. In just a moment, we will hear a presentation from the New York City Department of Environmental Protection Commissioner, Savoy Building, on the water rate proposal, and then we will open the meeting to hear from you, the members of the public. I would like to acknowledge and introduce Nancy Seinfeld, who is DEP's Deputy Commissioner for Customer Service. Nancy and other DEP staff members are on hand this evening to answer any specific questions that you might have about your account, and will be around after the evening's meeting. If you have not yet signed up to speak but would like to do so, please take a moment at any time to do so at the registration table at the front. Please also know that you can submit written testimony to the New York City Water Board up until the close of business on Friday, May 1st. These statements will be entered into the record, and copies will be distributed to the members of the Water Board prior to their adoption of the rate schedule for fiscal year 2016. I'd like to introduce the individuals joining me. First, Alfonso Carney, the chairman of the New York City Water Board. Water Board members Tawan Davis, Joe Finnery, Adam Freed, Jonathan Goldman. New York City Water Board Executive Director Steve Watts, and Treasurer Matteo LaPointe. Mr. Chairman, would you like to add anything before we begin?
Let me start by saying I'm new at my job. It was my great it was my honor last month to succeed Alan Moss as chairman of the Water Board. So I'm brand new in the position and looking forward to hearing what you all have to say tonight. I want to thank you all for coming. These are public hearings, and without the public they don't work. So it's good to know that there are people here, hopefully, who have things to tell us, questions to ask us about the great proposal that we have. Everybody knows how complex the New York City water system is, as well as the wastewater system. What we do, our job, is to try to ensure that it is protected, that it is operated properly, and improved where improvements are possible. The manner in which that is done has to be efficient and effective. And that's what we as the board try to oversee. It's an enormous job for us, as it is for the staff to actually implement what is required to keep the water system working properly. Shut that off. It's going to get warmer. All right.
Go ahead, we'll put it back on.
Okay, thank you. Shortly, Commissioner Lloyd is going to take this microphone and give her presentation. After she finishes, it's your turn. If you have comments you want to make, questions you want to ask, that's the time to do it. And I encourage you to do that. The members of this board are committed to keep an open mind until such time as we have heard public comment from all 5 boroughs. It's important that you know that. It's important that you understand that we need to hear what you have to say about the proposed, the rate proposal. And therefore, if you are into being here, and you don't have to be here tonight, thank you very much for doing that. If you're into it, we'd like very much to have you either ask us questions or make your comments. This is the 3rd of 5 borough hearings. The board was in Staten Island on Monday night, we were in Brooklyn last night, in the Bronx tonight, in Queens tomorrow night, and on Friday we're in Manhattan. So we're about halfway through the public hearing process. Again, I say it over and over, and I don't, it's it is with great purpose that I say it. It's a public hearing. I'd like to hear it. So please talk to us. With that, I'll give the floor and the microphone to Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you can't hear me, just raise your hand so I'll know that I need to get closer to the mic. Thank you. Also, I'd like to thank everyone who is here tonight. We have a presentation in which we try to present a sense of what goes into recommending a water rate, what our costs are, what our responsibilities are, and how we actually calculate what we propose to the water board. So it's a little long, bear with me, and I hope that you'll find at least some or most of it interesting and I hope informative. So, let me, okay, good. To start with the water rate proposal, what we are proposing to the water board this year is a 3.24% rate increase. No rate increase is welcome by any of the ratepayers, and we certainly recognize that, and there have been some very significant rate increases over the past several years, but this is the lowest rate since 2006, and we feel that it shows that we are making progress in terms of getting beyond some of the enormous expenses we took on in the first 10 or 12 years of the 21st century. The increase would amount to about $33 a year for an average single-family home, and from $22 to $31 per unit for multifamily dwellings. Let me start by giving a little bit of sense of what the rate pays for, what we carry out as our work every day. First of all, on the water supply side, we deliver about 1.1 billion gallons a day to over 9 million customers. That's the residents of New York City, and then about 1 million customers upstate. We protect about 2,000 square miles of the watershed to keep the water clean, including 19 reservoirs and 3 controlled lakes. We maintain many dams, aqueduct shafts, 7,000 miles of water mains, 110,000 fire hydrants within the city. On the wastewater treatment site, we treat about 1.2 billion gallons of wastewater each day. We operate and maintain 14 wastewater treatment plants, 96 pumping stations, and 7,000 miles of sewer. And we manage stormwater through green infrastructure, as well as 148,000 catch basins, storm sewers, and 4 major combined sewer overflow tanks, as well as the blue belts, which are really a large form of green infrastructure. What are the costs that drive DEP's budget and therefore the water rate? Well, first of all, we have an aging infrastructure. We're very fortunate that we have a very extensive infrastructure, but it is aging. The Croton system was built starting in the 1840s. We have many water mains that are over 100 years old. 2/3 of them are cast iron, which, although we were using it up until about 40 or 45 years ago, we now know gets very brittle over time. So we're trying to replace those. And Water Tunnel 1, which serves the Bronx and Manhattan, was built in 1917 and has been in continuous service since then. So worrying about that is a driver in terms of our investment in Water Tunnel 3. The second is we still have incomplete systems. 170 years later, we are still building the water and the wastewater system. One of the things that is really noteworthy is the fact that storm sewers have not been built out in large parts of Southeast Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. The third is mandates under the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act, and I'll talk about those in a little more detail in just a minute. And the fourth, increasingly, is the need to anticipate and adapt to climate change, and that's everything from hardening our wastewater infrastructure. The wastewater plants are built in low-lying areas on the edge of the water of necessity, and thinking about sizing our sewers. Our average sewer size we think is fine, but increasingly with climate change we're getting very intense cloudbursts. One One day on Long Island, a few months ago, they had 11 inches of rain in just a few hours. So we're trying to think about that and how we accommodate that in the future. And then periods of extreme drought. We're very lucky that we seem to be, and the climate scientists tell us that we will stay in the wet slice of climate change. So unlike much of the country, we are not in drought right now, but with climate change, we expect extreme cycles. So we expect to be wet most of the time, but also have some drought cycles that probably exceed what we've seen in the past. So how do we invest in addressing these different aspects of the system? First of all, in terms of aging infrastructure, I mentioned Water Tunnel 1. Water Tunnel 2 has also been in continuous service since 1937, which serves Brooklyn and Queens. City Water Tunnel 3 has the Brooklyn and Bronx sections are complete. It was begun in 1973, precisely to allow us to take the older water lines offline and repair and inspect them. And it is, we have still a couple of shafts to do to activate the Brooklyn Queens, and they in turn will serve Staten Island. But that was a 50-year project that cost, some of it before the Water Finance Authority and the Water Board was created as a financial structure, but overall it's cost about $5 billion. The Delaware Aqueduct repair. We have an aqueduct that brings about 50% of the water to the city. That is not so old, but has had leaks for a very long time, to the point where we've been concerned about its stability. And so we're in the process. We've begun construction on the shafts, which will in turn allow us to build a bypass tunnel under the Hudson River to simply switch the water over to that bypass tunnel and mothball the leaky part of that aqueduct. Dams. Whenever you, at least it seems to me, whenever I hear about aging infrastructure, two things that people talk about immediately are bridges and dams. Because if there's a failure, so many people are affected and at risk. And for us also, our water supply would be at risk. So we are doing a lot of investing in dams. We realized after Katrina that Gilboa Dam we felt was not strong enough and made significant investments in that. And the next one, which we're in the process of completing, the next dam that we need to strengthen, the set of dams are at the Ashokan Reservoir. And finally, we started last year a high priority accelerated water main replacement program, where we think we have water mains, because we're starting to see leaks, we think they may be becoming fragile. We are going in and trying to replace them on an accelerated basis, and typically we do the sewer because they were probably put in at the same time, and then Con Ed comes in, our national grid, and they do their infrastructure as well. Investing in system completion involves, for the water from the west of Hudson, which is 90% of our water, it's 100% right now, but typically 90%, we always want there to be two tunnels bringing it. We don't want ever to be completely dependent on one in case there's a problem with that tunnel. When we opened an ultraviolet treatment system for Cat Dell, one of the tunnels that we had coming from Kensico Reservoir no longer works because of the elevations. So we will construct a second tunnel so that we once again have a dual system. I mentioned the sewer build-out. We will be doing a tremendous amount of sewer build-outs. We have already spent billions of dollars on this, but we will be spending a great deal more. And finally, blue belts have been for 20 or more years on Staten Island, something we have done, and they're really an early type of green infrastructure, very extensive one you see in the lower left picture, where instead of building a sewer line, we simply take a daylighted water course and use it to bring the water naturally, and the soil and gravel cleans the water as well before it goes into the surrounding waters. Drinking water mandates. So much of what we do, everything we do really, from the time the rain leaves the sky until the wastewater and stormwater goes back into the surrounding waters, is driven by one of two acts. One is the Safe Drinking Water Act from 1974 that sets national health-based drinking water standards for public water, and in particular it requires 2 times of treatment against the bacteria of Cryptosporidium and Giardia, both of which tend to occur in water naturally, and both of which can be very deadly if they get into drinking water. And some examples of some of the mandated projects that we have done or will be doing are the Croton filtration plant to filter the water from east of the Hudson. That's about 10% of our water. That's under Van Cortlandt Park right here in the Bronx. Upstate, west of the Hudson, we are not building a filtration plant, but instead we have a very aggressive, what's called a filtration avoidant determination from EPA, which allows us not to filter the water, but we have made and continue to make very big investments. And we've upgraded more than 100, built or upgraded more than 100 wastewater treatment plants upstate. We've built or upgraded over 400 septic systems. And we've installed almost 7,000 best management practice at farms to keep runoff from animal waste and fertilizers from going into the water system. You may remember the problem in Lake Erie a few months ago where there was, from farms, too many nutrients going in and created algae that required them to shut down the water system. And finally, I did mention the Catdell ultraviolet disinfection facility. That was a mandate as well. And between that and the Croton filtration plant, we were building on the same timetable in a very aggressive construction market in the mid-aughts, two of the biggest projects that New York City had ever built at the same time, which made them even more expensive. On the Clean Water Act, that addresses the waters of the United States. It's very broad, but essentially what it means that everything that comes out of the sanitary sewer system or comes out of combined sewers or storm sewer system that goes into the catch basin or really runs off from lands adjacent to the water has to be controlled in a way so that fish, shellfish, wildlife are protected, and so the water can be used for recreation in and on the water, and that increasingly is interpreted. DEC has new regulations that says every water body around New York City has to be swimmable. And that really goes to the amount of bacteria in the water. This has been really a bigger undertaking even than the clean water for drinking water, and has involved projects like Newtown Creek and other wastewater treatment plants, the nitrogen removal upgrades that we're doing for all the water that goes into Jamaica Bay or Long Island Sound, very expensive undertakings, and long-term control plans in the 2/3 of the city that have combined sewers to capture, combined sewer overflows that happen when there's not enough room at the plant, and stormwater surcharges the system and we spill into the surrounding waters with some raw sewage in it. And we have just submitted over the past few months long-term control plans for the Hutchinson River, for Westchester Creek, and we will shortly be submitting one for the Bronx River. I do want to mention that for all this investment, we are getting something. New York City is getting something. This is a map from 1985 and 2013, and the areas that are blue and green are areas that blue is swimmable, green is available for recreational use, which means you can boat in it, and these are all available now for recreational use and swimming, as you can see. There are only a few areas left that are not suitable, and those are primarily the tributaries through the city that many of them were person-made. Some of them originally were creeks, but they've been used for industrial use. They've been used for dumping over the years. They're very contaminated by and large. They don't flush naturally. There's no river flowing into them anymore, nor does the tide come in and flush them. So these have been very stubborn and expensive for us to think about cleaning up, but we're now in the process of doing that with our last long-term control plans. I just wanted to mention briefly that the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act also have operating costs for us. Many, as I said, everything we do is regulated from the very beginning to the very end. But I just wanted to give one example, which are all of the testing we have to do and reporting for compliance. So we have 5 drinking water labs that test 270 parameters of the drinking water. We do 550,000 annual analyses and 1,500 drinking water sampling sites around the city. You see those silver boxes on the sidewalk that say DEP on them. We regularly go around throughout the city and actually test the drinking water right before it goes into people's homes. And on the harbor side, we have four water quality labs. We test for 25 parameters, more analyses. So we're doing actually over 1 million analyses a year. So what has this all added up to, all the investment we have done over the past 30 years in these different areas that I described? Well, our expenditures, as you can see, have been sort of half and half. About 42% were for drinking water, about 58% for clean water purposes, sewers and wastewater treatment. The short story is that it's actually harder to clean up dirty water than it is to keep clean water clean. So the drinking water at this point has not required quite as much investment as the wastewater. And about 47%, but on the right you see everything that's mandated. So it is, at this point, really half of all of our investment over the debt that we're carrying. So it's very substantial. Just to put this in a little context, we're always looking around the country trying to see if somebody's either getting a better deal from their regulators or has found a smarter way to do it, a more cost-effective way to do it. And one thing you can see is the pale gray lines are the 30 largest cities. The ones in color are the ones that we think have most in common with us in terms of age and the kind of infrastructure they have. And what can you see is that after the Clean Water Act was passed, really most of the water and wastewater utilities stalled for about 25 years. I think everybody embraced the goal, but people were very reluctant, including us, to have to pay. They have to ask their ratepayers to pay for all that investment. So we all stalled and deferred and negotiated, and then finally starting about 15 years ago, our regulators around the country, really driven by EPA, but in many cases it's delegated to state agencies, said you just got to do it now. And we started looking at fines if we were not in compliance that would run per project from $10 to $14 million a year. And then as time went on, if we didn't do it, it would get more expensive. For example, with the equipment filtration plant, if we do not have it operating by May 17th of 2015, we have a non-negotiable fine of $65 million. So it was a very strong incentive for everyone to really get serious and get these projects done. You can see, let me just mention so you can see on the previous page, even with all the increases, we're sort of in the middle of the pack. The average for the 30 cities of increases is 6.3%. That's in black. New York City is 6.8%. We're a little bit above the national average. In terms of what our water rates actually are, we're just a little bit below the national average. And you can see all the cities there, which we think is, given how many increases we've had, it shows we think that we were very low to start with, and we're very pleased that we haven't gone higher at this point. And we also, whoops, how did I do that? We also like to point out, we certainly want people to understand that we are very aware that rate increases are extremely difficult, particularly for small homeowners, particularly for people who are not very affluent. And we work very hard to keep the costs down. And we think one indicator of that is that of all families' typical monthly costs, from housing to electricity to natural gas to internet if they have it, to heating oil, we are really the only cost in New York City that's below the national average. New York City is a very expensive place to do construction and to operate facilities, to get things delivered through traffic, all the things that make it expensive. So we are always glad to see that we are keeping the costs down, although not as low as everyone, I'm sure, in this room wishes they were. I think I also like to mention the DEP staff over the years has worked very hard to improve customer service. 8 or 10 years ago, we had a huge number of estimated bills because you had to knock on a door and get someone's house to get a bill. We installed something called automated meter reading. If you're a property owner, you're certainly familiar with it. There was some pain associated with that because we had a lot of very old meters, and when we put in, old meters tend to run slow. When we put in new meters and they started more accurately recording the amount of water being used, many people's bills went up. But what we have found long term is that it has really helped us build a much better relationship with our customers, and we think it serves them well. We've reduced estimated bills by 81%, and we've reduced disputes about the bills by over half since 2011. Through this, we've also been able to put in place, because we can monitor everyone's water use real time, we've been able to offer a leak notification program. And that means that if the water use spikes in a residence, we can let people know you probably have a problem. Sometimes it's not a problem. One of my favorite examples is somebody we notified who said, what was the date? Oh yeah, my kids and grandchildren were all here. They were all doing laundry all around the clock. So sometimes it's not a leak, but sometimes it is a leak, and leaks can be extraordinarily expensive for running toilet or something else that's causing a leak. So we feel that this has been a very good addition. And we have, of the people who have had leak notifications, they've saved an average of $831 each. We've also expanded what kinds of leaks can be forgiven. It used to be a running toilet. We expected you to be on top of that. But now, last year, the water board expanded to cover many more fixtures and types of leaks. And now that leak forgiveness has returned $1.5 million just in this year, at about $1,000 for each person who actually had a leak and came in and had it forgiven. And then we have 178,000 almost customers enrolled in the service line protection program. That can be a very expensive problem. Most people don't even think about it. Service lines can just go along and be fine for over 100 years. And then when they go, the homeowner is responsible, the property owner is responsible for the service line from the water or sewer line to into their homes. And it can be $15,000 or $20,000 to get one replaced. So we feel this was a competitive selection of the provider of the insurance. We think it offers real benefit to people, and it's been very popular. In terms of customer service, also, customer service is fixing something quickly when it goes wrong. And one of the things that we have done over the past year is we've been fixing catch basin complaints about 21% faster. The average time to repair or replace hydrants has improved by 22%. And along, we think with that service line protection program, the number of complaints we get about leaks on private property has gone down by 37%. We think because people know who to call and get it fixed rather than calling DEP. The other thing that we have done is over the past, I think it's about 4 years, had a program called Operation Excellence, where we've been working to go through systematically all of our operations and try to find savings through things like renegotiating chemical and service contracts. So rather than having them be bifurcated among different bureaus, they're now consolidated, which gets us better deals. We've reduced chemical use. We've redone some of the energy use, and that is saving us now $45 million on an annualized basis, which then, of course, helps us control the water leak. I talked a lot about the capital investments over the past 30 years, so just a quick look ahead. I think that you will see things that I've already mentioned here, but we have some very big investments coming up in the capital budget. The executive budget gets released on May 7th, and we've been very much in conversation also around one New York City, one NYC, for the things that are included in that long-term plan for the city. So you'll see things that I've mentioned, and I'll call out a couple of them just very briefly. Let me mention a couple of projects in the Bronx. Green infrastructure in the Westchester Creek, Hutch River, and Bronx River area. We're investing $76 million. And at the Hunts Point wastewater treatment plant, we're installing new centrifuges and digesters to improve that. And over the next 10 years, we have over $800 million of capital projects in the Bronx. I want to take a minute just to focus on green infrastructure, because this is sort of a sea change for us. We've always been gray infrastructure, underground, pipes and pumps. And really, one of the things that's changed dramatically over probably the last 5 to 7 years is the development of a whole green infrastructure program. The idea is if you can catch, with stormwater increasing both in frequency and intensity, if we can capture it before it gets into the sewers, not to mention before it runs off onto people's properties, that can reduce CSOs, it reduces the cost of operating our plants, So we have been developing these first on a pilot basis. Our first couple hundred bioswales turned out to capture more rainwater than we had actually thought we could engineer them to. So we are very pleased about that, and we have 7,000 bioswales. That's what you see in the lower left-hand corner. A bioswale looks like a very large tree pit. It has engineered soil and gravel that retain the rainwater in them, and a curb cut coming in from the gutter. And then they're planted with things that use a lot of water. We're also now partnering with a lot of other city agencies like the Parks Department, the Community Park Initiative, for all the parks has stormwater management going in under the parks that they are upgrading. We also have a partnership with the Trust for Public Land to do schoolyards with stormwater management in them. You'll see an example, it's PS 261 in Brooklyn, the before and after picture where you have a play yard that's just macadam and it gets done over. We do the stormwater part of it, and the Trust for Public Land raises money to do the rest of the play equipment and that sort of thing. And this is just a quick look. These are the areas that I mentioned, the areas where we're doing a lot of green infrastructure in the Bronx. The light blue is in construction, the medium blue will be in construction by this fall, and the bright blue, navy blue, I'm not sure, is the spring of 2016. So people will start seeing a lot more green infrastructure in the Bronx. It's very popular in the neighborhoods because it's also an amenity, because it's green and beautiful, and then we and others care for it. Okay, just a word about all this talk about the capital budget, and we talk about it so much because it has such an enormous effect on the water rate, on our budget and on the water rate. So this is how it turns into to a water rate charge. When we commit to do a big project, OMB approves it, the Office of Management and Budget, and they then hold it. We have a certain budget for the next 10 years. They put a placeholder in, so we can't overspend our budget. That's called a commitment. And then once we can't start a project till we have that commitment. Once we have that commitment, then we start designing it, we hire somebody to build it, and then we start actually making expenditures as we start doing the project. And as soon as we make expenditures, we start to borrow the money to pay for those expenditures. And when that debt is incurred, we start paying debt service. The crude rule of thumb is for every 100 million of capital, we have to pay about $5 million a year. It's just like a mortgage. Generally, our bonds run for 30 years, which is actually a good deal. Some water and wastewater utilities are now doing 50 and 100-year bonds because that's how long most of the infrastructure lasts. But we don't think that's really prudent. We really think it's better to get them paid for and out of the way. So we do it on a 30-year cycle, pretty much, sometimes less than that. And you'll see that, look at that dip right here. And remember it when we go to the next slide, because that's 2015. We had a very good year in terms of debt service. We ended up paying less debt service than we had anticipated for a couple of reasons. So the Water Finance Authority that issues and manages our debt is always looking for ways to get better deals, ways to trade in old debt that's more expensive and either defease it, either retire it, or in some cases roll it over for debt that's less expensive now. And this is because interest rates are so low right now that they have been able to do that. And it comes back to us as a benefit on the water rate. Okay, so now let me just talk a little bit about the financial outlook for the coming year, that's the basis for setting the water rate. So you'll see on the sort of lower left part of that pie chart, that's that debt service that we're talking about. It is now the single largest part of our budget, and we are very focused on that. That in turn, you'll see, if you look at the first line on the 15 to 16, that low year is the $1.4 billion that we paid in debt service in 2015. I know it doesn't sound like a low year, but it was actually significantly less than we had anticipated. So we're very pleased with that. Looking forward, we always project what the interest rate will be conservatively. The Water Finance Authority does. Generally, they estimate it at about 5% because everyone's always thinking that interest rates are about to go up. and we don't want to, because we don't get any city money, we need to be able to pay our debt service ourselves out of our rate. So we always estimate conservatively. We always hope that we will get a slightly better deal on the debt service, but we have to budget for that. So that's going up significantly this year. The second thing is that buyback of debt that I talked about. We are also trying to do more of what's called pay-go, which is basically instead of borrowing money to do a project, we simply pay for the project real time. We can't do a huge amount of that because instead of spending $5 million that year, we spend $100 million, and that really doesn't make sense if the infrastructure is going to last for 50 or 75 or 100 years. We're going to get a lot of value out of it. But for shorter term projects, we are starting smaller projects to look at doing that. Operations and maintenance is going up about 8%. That's significantly the labor settlements that I'm sure you read about over the past year. We have not had contracts for several years, so there were significant catch-up payments. It's also operating Croton, which is going to use Croton filtration plant, a huge amount of energy, a lot of chemicals and that sort of thing. And I mentioned that nitrogen removal. We're rolling out that, and it's a very expensive operating expense. The chemical that is used to remove it so it doesn't become algae breeding is a very expensive chemical. So our total cost, you will see, once you offset all of those things compared to last year, actually are slightly lower. Those are the total system costs. We add to that what we call year-end cash on hand. We always keep, as a good industry practice, 15% of the operating budget cash in hand. That's because we want to be able to pay our debt service, but we also keep it because we have no other source of income. We can't go to the city budget and say, oh my goodness, we had a catastrophic problem, please give us $200 million. So, for example, I mentioned Gilboa Dam. When we had decided we had to do emergency repairs on that, we had to immediately write emergency contracts. We had to have the cash in hand to do that. And it's a good thing we did because we actually had most of the emergency repairs in place, and we think that it might not have withstood Hurricane Irene if we had not had those in place, which was a terrible storm upstate. Sandy, we had to go in and do repairs to our wastewater treatment plants, many of which were flooded. We didn't have time to put it in next year's budget. So we keep that cash in hand, and we keep it at about 25%. It doesn't get frittered away. Whatever is not spent the next year immediately rolls over to be applied to the next year's budget, and the first thing we do is pay debt service, and that keeps our bond rates low, which in turn saves us money. So if you look at the very bottom line, last year's total system cost compared to what we're projecting for 2016, you'll see there's actually no significant change. So I'm sure you're wondering, then why is there a proposed rate increase?
Yes.
And I'm about to tell you why. You'll see those same two numbers, the total system costs at the top that we talked about before. There's virtually no difference between them. But if you get to the next line, you will see that from 14 into 15, we carried over $987 million. This year, we had less to carry over. And so that money gets applied against the budget. So that's less that we have to collect. But it is less than last year's, $81 million less than it was last year that we have to apply against that almost identical operating budget. Then we also collect revenue upstate. I mentioned the upstate customers. They pay us water rates, and there's some other non-city revenue. That's about the same. It's $3 million less this year compared to 2015. And then that's also less the rental payment. As I mentioned, we pay rent on the infrastructure that we use, that we inherited from the city when we took it over. And over the years, there's been a commitment, particularly from this mayor, to start returning that. And we're increasing that at about 10% of the rental payment each year. We pay it in, and then they give us a return on it the next year. So next year, that's going from the $31 million we got in 2015 to $41 million. So when you get to the bottom line, because of those differences that I just described, actually, the revenue we need is about $58 million more in 2016 compared to the revenue we needed in 2015. So now go down to the next box below that, and you'll see that 2015 number. That's the amount of revenue we brought in with the 2015 water rate. But we're not going to sell as much water next year because of conservation. And this is the thing that every utility gets into. It affects energy, it affects everything. You have to basically at some point decide, are you going to do the responsible thing and try to encourage conservation? Now, there are very good reasons to encourage conservation. One is we're going to shut down the Delaware Aqueduct probably in 2021. That brings 50% of our water. When we do the switch over to the new bypass tunnel I described, we are going to have to reduce our water use. One of the ways we're going to have enough water to survive while that's shut down is to reduce our water use by 5% by that date. So we're trying to do it every year. We expect to get 1.5% this coming year. We're encouraging the use of low-flow toilets and fixtures and other things like that. But that means, of course, that it brings in less revenue. That's a trade-off, conservation against revenue. We think the responsible thing to do is to encourage conservation. I also mentioned earlier we are expecting down the road that we will have some terrible droughts. Again, you can't deal with those if you are using lots and lots of water. So over time, we hope to keep reducing the amount of water. But that does mean that we will bring in slightly less revenue. That $3,526,000 compared to $3,582,000 is a $56 million difference if we charge the same rate next year as we charged in 2015. But we need the larger number that you see in bright yellow there. We have a gap of $114 million in our projected budget, and the 3.24% proposed increase is to fill that gap. So that's how we construct the rate that we bring to the water board and what we're proposing tonight. We are, and this administration is very concerned about the effect, particularly on small homeowners, particularly on less affluent residents of New York City. Last year, we introduced something called the Home Water Assistance Program, and that is a program that if a family is eligible for heat, that's a federally financed program to assist in heating, then automatically we give them a credit that's equal to about 25% of the minimum charge. It's a $116 credit against the water bill. If someone is on the minimum charge, if they're using less than 100 gallons a day, their bill is $464 a year. So this is a $116 credit against that $464. That covered about 12,500 households. This year we are expanding it very significantly to cover all seniors and disabled who are eligible for, I always want to call it a rebate. It's not a rebate, Steve, what do you call it? If you're eligible.
It's an exemption.
Exemption. If you're eligible on your property tax to get an exemption, automatically we will give you the exact same $116 discount. You don't have to register. You will get it automatically, but you do have to be registered for that program. And Eric introduced Nancy Seinflon. She is here. If you want to make sure that you are registered for that program, you're eligible if your income is less than $37,500 a year. She will follow up to make sure that you are registered for the Department of Finance property tax program, and then you will automatically get this return as well on your water rate. And so that's a program that will now cover about 59,000 homeowners, and that's about 7% of our customer base. And we continue to look for ways, we'll continue to look for ways in future years to try to create some buffer for people for whom the water rate is difficult. I should mention just a couple other things because they're part of the rate that gets adopted. One is the minimum charge. The minimum charge historically has always gone up. When the water rate goes up, the minimum charge goes up to 8%. Last year we froze it. This year we are holding that freeze again. So this will be the third year that the minimum charge has not increased. And as I mentioned, that is $464 a year, which is about 45% of what a typical average home would use. About 26% of the bills we issue to single-family homes are minimum bills. So a lot of people are taking advantage of this. They're conserving, they're using less water, and then they're getting this water rate. The other thing I mentioned was the service line protection program. The only thing I wanted to say about that is that there's an index that allows the vendors who provide it to increase it when costs go up a certain amount, but they are not increasing it this year. And the last thing is we are offering a modest $10 credit for enrolling in e-billing. That saves us money in terms of mailing costs. It also then allows to provide leak protection notifications and communicate on email with people if there's some other thing that we feel they should know about the water use. So those are the major components of the rate. So I'll just end by saying again, this is the proposed rate of the 3.24%. I will say again, I think all of us would prefer to see it be zero, but we weren't able to propose that this year. And that's about a $33. If somebody's a typical average single-family home would be about $32 unless they're on the minimum charge. And that is the information. If you want to get more after tonight, more information, that's our website and the way that you can communicate those as well as in writing. And I thank you very much for your patience and attention, and we would very much like to have your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're now going to open up the floor to comments from the public. Again, if you wish to speak and you have not yet signed up to do so, please take a moment to go to the registration table and sign up. We ask that everyone keep their remarks to 5 minutes, so we make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak this evening. I would like to call on the first speaker, James Buckley.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'll give these out at the end, but what I wanted to do, I've written testimony that I'll submit, so I just want to highlight some things. So my written testimony is longer than what I'm about to say, hopefully. Anyway, UNHB, we are a nonprofit community organization that's been working in the Bronx for 31 years. More than that now, I guess. University Neighborhood Housing Program. So we've been slow down? Okay. Thank you.
Only 5 minutes.
We've been participating in meetings about water and sewer pricing since the early 90s. Preparing for tonight's hearing, we found testimony from water board hearings in 1992. We testified at the City Council in support of the multifamily conservation program when it was first established. While we disagree about rates, we have had a cooperative working relationship with TEP staff with regard to billing questions, AMR questions, and the multifamily conservation program application process. We've always testified against rate increases, and tonight is no exception. The difference tonight is that we're also submitting our report called Affordable Water for Affordable Housing for your consideration. We provide in the report documentation to support our case that there should be a special rate for buildings with affordability regulatory agreements. Specifically, we are proposing a $688 per apartment per year affordable housing cap. To be eligible, buildings would either be currently under a regulatory agreement with affordability restrictions or be willing to enter one. Buildings would have to comply with the requirements of the multifamily conservation program and implement a water conservation awareness program for tenants and building staff. We fully understand that this proposal cannot be implemented by the water board and requires administration buy-in. We're trying to find a balance, and I kind of feel like we have been for many years now, a balance between housing affordability, water conservation, and fairness. And by all indications, the de Blasio administration shares that goal. The administration has shown a greater understanding of the importance of this balance than previous administrations, offering the proposals that the Commissioner just highlighted for seniors and disabled. Our report makes the case that an affordable housing cap could have a significant impact on the preservation of affordable housing in New York City. NYU's Carmen Center has documented reduction of the number of affordable units and the possibility of more units opting out of regulatory agreements in the coming 10 years. We've talked with owners and managers of buildings who indicated that the incentive of an affordable housing cap could be enough of an incentive to enter into regulatory agreements around affordability. Complying with the NCP Conservation Awareness Program and implementing a water conservation awareness program will strive to address the conservation issues. And the new cap seeks to address the regressive nature of the current water and sewer policy. When we raised this issue recently, someone said water and sewer is only about 6 to 8% of a building's expenses. That is approximately the number, about 8% on a citywide basis, but on a borough basis, that's not the case. The Rent Guidelines Board number for pre-1947 in buildings in the Bronx show about 10.9%, and in our report we show you a subset of community-controlled buildings that is paying, on average, 13%. In the set of 115 buildings on which we had the most detailed information, more than 80% of the buildings had high enough water use to make the multifamily conservation program the correct financial choice. The only buildings with lower than 52,000 gallons per apartment per year were the 7 buildings that were primarily composed of studios and 1-bedrooms. In nonprofit community development, groups are working to meet the needs of the community, which in many cases is providing housing for lower-income households with apartments with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms to accommodate families of larger size. The financial picture in these buildings is very different than the higher-end buildings in New York City. This report tries to make the point visible with a pie chart comparing an East 79th Street building in Manhattan and an East 187th Street building in the Bronx. The buildings are approximately the same size. The water bills were $622 per apartment per year, or $51 per month in the building on East 79th, and $975 per apartment per year, or $81 per month on East 187th. However, the average monthly rent on East 79th building is $2,772, and the average on East 187th is $756. The same infrastructure is necessary for both, but the impact of water costs are clearly different. We don't think a cap for affordable housing is ideal. We've always thought that the method of calculating rates needs to change. However, we see an affordable housing cap as an important step to take right now.
Thank you. We'll take those for the record. Thank you. Our next speaker is Pat Logan.
Good evening, and thanks for taking the time to listen to the testimony. I'm with a group called Lemley & Wolf. We're a real estate company that focuses on affordable in New York City. We specialize in management, development, and construction of affordable housing, with a real focus on affordable rehabilitation and new construction projects. We currently manage over 6,000 apartments, with the largest concentration located in northern Manhattan and the Bronx. Almost all of the apartments we manage are subject to rent stabilization or rent control, and a significant portion of these apartments are made even more affordable through rent and income restrictions instituted by regulatory agreements with the City of New York. We are here to offer testimony in support of a cap on water and sewer costs of $688 per unit per year for affordable residential multifamily buildings. As you know, buildings enrolled in MCP are currently charged $976 per unit per year for water and sewer. DEP has proposed an increase of $31 to $1,007 per unit per year. While DEP's proposed rate increase has been touted as a low increase on a historical basis, the increase is really quite significant to affordable housing multifamily buildings, taking into account the already high percentage that water and sewer represent of both total maintenance and operation in buildings and overall income. And this is due, as the Commissioner pointed out in her opening remarks, to the significant water and sewer increases over the last decade. So in preparation for this hearing, we've reviewed the actual increase in water and sewer costs as a percentage of both overall building maintenance and operation and income in a 384-unit cross-section of our affordable housing portfolio, all of those units are enrolled in an MCP. And to give you some examples, in an 11-building, 84-unit portfolio located in the longest section of the Bronx, water and sewer costs have risen from 5.7% of overall maintenance and operation in 2005 to 10.5% in 2014. And during that same period, water and sewer costs have increased from 3.8% of total income received in the building to 6.5% by 2014. In a 6-building, 244-unit portfolio in Inwood and Washington Heights, water and sewer costs have risen from 5.5% of overall maintenance and operation in 2005 to 12.8% in 2014. And during that same period, water and sewer costs have increased from 4.6% of total income received in the building to 9.4%, so almost doubling. And just want to make the point that I think that Jim made also, that luxury and free market multifamily properties have the ability to raise rents to cover escalating maintenance and operation costs. Affordable housing owners, which are subject to, at least the buildings are subject to tenant income and rent restrictions, have a more limited ability to raise income annually to cover water and sewer and other increases. While many of the costs associated with operating real estate are not within the control of the city, water and sewer charges are one area that the city can control. So I think implementing a discounted water and sewer cap for affordable housing would represent an acknowledgement of the operating budget challenges facing affordable housing and stem the large and growing share of affordable housing, the affordable housing operation budget that is diverted to water and sewer costs. A cap would also help facilitate the ability of affordable housing operators to preserve 120,000 units of housing over the next 10 years, a really important and critical goal of this administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Raymond Alter.
My name is Raymond Alter. I'm a property manager for Duggar Management Corporation here in the Bronx. We manage 175 properties consisting of 3,000 units of low-income housing in the Bronx and Brooklyn. We have our private portfolio, but the majority workload consists of low-income housing owned by 11 non-for-profit housing groups throughout the city. The cost of water has been increasing at an alarming rate. We are in the process of collecting information needed to submit the annual real property income expense reports for all these properties to the New York City Department of Finance. We are now finding that for the period of January 1st to December 31st of 2014, a number of the low-income properties we manage will actually show water expenses that are greater than heating expenses. Let me repeat that. During the last calendar year, we have found that a number of low-income properties we manage had water bills that were greater than the cost of the heating bills. We agree that something needs to be done to protect low-income housing from the ever-increasing cost of water. We support the conclusion of the recent study conducted by University Neighborhood Housing Program, and we urge the New York City Water Board to recognize the importance of low-income housing. We urge the New York City Water Board to cap water bills for low-income housing at $688 per unit per year to ensure the future of affordable housing in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Koch.
Hi, good evening. My name is Richie Cook, and I am a student. Not a big deal. I'm a student at Fordham, and I'm also a fellow working with UNHP. Before I began working at UNHP, I knew nothing about water rates, and after this report, I now know more than I could have ever cared to. I won't be as persuasive as my colleague was, but I would like to point out one thing that I came across while compiling this report. New York as a whole is doing a very good job with the water rate, and it has been doing a better job under Mayor de Blasio's regime. However, it is a very unequal, has been very unequal progress. The Bronx has been left behind if you look through the reports. Thank you. This borough is paying more and it is also making less, and so it is squeezing these people more than in other boroughs. And if progress is to be made, I think our report outlines several proposals that are wise, and I would simply ask that we go beyond keeping this rate at a low rate and possibly look at changing the structure of the system itself. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Joanna Kletter.
Hello, my name is Joanna Kletter. I too work for UNHP. And we work to provide low affordable housing to residents of the Northwest Bronx. This year's proposed increase of 3.24% and last year's 3.35% increase represent the lowest increases in water rates in the past 10 years. But forgive me, we're not celebrating these low increases since the underlying issues affecting affordable rates have not been addressed. Remember the 3% increase in 2006? And how we were hit with a 14.5% increase just 3 years later? Today, UNHP released the report that Jim and both Richie have spoken about, affordable water for affordable housing. I'm asking each water board member to please read the full report with an open mind. In it, we give multiple proposals and recommendations, many of which are also published in our 2008 Water and Sewer Rate Reform Report. Maybe you'll listen to us this time. Listen to our fellow managers share experiences of high water use in affordable housing buildings with larger households. Listen to how the Bronx has continued to have the highest percentage of operating costs on the water and sewer expense line. We appreciate the efforts to bring back the toilet replacement program, formerly the toilet rebate program. We appreciate the My DEP account AMR online portal, but these efforts are not enough. The rate setting system is unbalanced. It's no surprise that affordable housing population are heavy users. The creation of an affordable housing cap program, as suggested in our report, for buildings that would sign a city regulatory agreement is needed. We hope DEP would set a cap rate equal to the city's average that you state is $688 per apartment per year, giving a $329 reduction off the current MCP rate. Market rate properties are able to set their rents, but our affordable housing buildings, we are under income and rent restrictions. We're unable to cover these rent increases every year. We also feel that the city and DEP could do more to promote responsible water use awareness. Every New Yorker knows 311. Every New Yorker has seen advertisements, see something, say something. You smell gas, call 911. The Con Ed Green Team, they advertise all over subway cars and on the radio on ways to cut your electricity bills, but there are no marketing campaigns addressing water conservation. Lastly, I want to sincerely thank Mr. Warren Liebold for always answering every email that I send to him, his time and effort that he lends to help solve our water problems, and also Mr. Sharon, I know who this is, Sharon Nato Singh, for diligently processing all my MCP applications, which I think I'm probably around 30 or 40. Please show the same diligence when it comes to fixing this unbalanced system. I have several copies, if you didn't go on from Jim, of our report with me tonight, but you can also download it and download our 2008 report on our website at www.unhp.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Peter, or is it Borbo?
Thank you. I don't have a lot of statistics because I frankly am overwhelmed tonight with Commissioner Lloyd's explanation of PowerPoint after PowerPoint. And I'm just overwhelmed. I do know, I will speak from the heart. We manage about 2,500 apartments in the Bronx and Manhattan, Staten Island. Most of them are low-income, affordable housing, and the $688 rate versus the $1,076 would make a huge difference in making ends meet. As you know, low-income housing often has its own challenges because maintenance can often be higher for a variety of reasons. The RSA guidelines that we're mandated to follow are what they are. The other thing that is important for the board to understand is that it's not just that, but when you have low-income housing, you can't exceed certain rents based on the AMI that we're governed by when tenants move in. So a typical two-bedroom apartment is often $200, $300, $400 below what would go for in a rent-stabilized market, but it doesn't have the restrictions of a tax credit or low-income housing. So I think the board should strongly consider changing the rate structure for different kinds of properties. It makes sense. It doesn't, you know, you need the income. You're just going to have to see how you can make it up with. We shouldn't be all billed on the same rate. We do different things, and you know, should we be billed as much as, I don't know, schools, institutions, hospitals, manufacturing, businesses? I don't think we should. It's a different situation. So I urge you to take a hard look at what we're advocating, which is a different rate structure. That $300 per apartment makes a big difference for us in keeping these properties alive and well. As you know, Mayor de Blasio has huge goals of 200,000 units over the next 10 years. If we're going to implement that, they do have to make economic sense, just like you need to make economic sense. We need to make economic sense in running a building. So, and lastly, I just want to make sure there's a human element. We do rent. We are the providers for housing to the teachers, the security guards, the dishwashers, the people that you may not see necessarily, but they make New York tick. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Lagarde. Excuse me.
I'm a retired school teacher. I'm state certified in biology, 30 credits above my master's degree. I'm here as a small homeowner, and I'm here to represent the East 217th Street Block Association, 1000 block. I'm here in reference to the New York City Water Board rate increase. And I have my account number on here. And I have titled this Protest and Rebuttal. Number one, taxation without representation. According to the Declaration of Independence of 1776, taxes may not be imposed on the people without their consent. A statement of city finances must be forthcoming as a report back to the people. Where is the protocol? Why don't you follow the rules? For example, Bloomberg canceled our property tax rebates without the consent of the people. This fact represents the deterioration of government. Now de Blasio wants to increase water taxes 3.25% to 4% annually. This is exorbitant without the consent of the people. The math indicates that a $100 water bill becomes a $300 water bill. Why? For what reason? Justify this, please. Quality of life issues. Senior citizens, small homeowners living in the Northeast Bronx on fixed incomes could lose their homes to lien holders. Yes, for water. This sudden increase would be arbitrary and capricious, present hardship and immorality. The middle class is gradually being absorbed, squeezed to the brink of extinction by taxation without representation. The people need services, not increased taxes. Water is rain that falls from the sky and is a gift from God, along with gravity. The water cycle. Will this ridiculous increase improve on that? Cause and effect. This protest is mounted in the name of our children and our children's children. The Northeast Bronx Community Board 12, District 12, is being targeted for exploitation because of our vulnerability due to 30 years of a lack of appropriate representation. Thank you. I saved you a minute and 24 seconds. Mr. Chairman, hearing officer.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Sir,
Thank you, ma'am.
you'll share, please?
Sure.
Lady down there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Mind
much.
if I keep one for myself? Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
At this point in the meeting, we'd like to open up the floor to anyone that has not yet spoken, not registered to speak, but would like to address the board. Seeing none, at this point, before we conclude the hearing, I would like to remind everyone that written remarks can be submitted to the New York City Water Board by mail. The address is behind me, 5917 Junction Boulevard, the 8th floor in Flushing, New York, 11373. You may also submit written testimony or comments via email at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov, again, behind me. We ask that you submit these remarks no later than 5 p.m. this Friday, May the 1st. Mr. Buckley.
I just wanted to make one comment. I forgot to say this before. Thank you all for coming. I have come to hearings in the past sometimes when the water board members are few and far between, you know, so we do appreciate you all coming out to be with us tonight.
Thank you. Stay.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to make one comment. We had a devil of a time finding this place. And I don't understand why you would have water hearings in this obscure location. We had a devil of a time finding it. But thank you for coming. 3.25% is too much money for that to pay for water.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, unless there's anything else, since we have no further business, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.